Hi everyone, it's Keren here with a card tutorial featuring Concord and 9th Mandala Stamp and Die cut set with a scratch resist technique. Enjoy! As always, all the supplies are linked below in the description area. I took a piece of white Bristol paper. It's pretty thick, but I wanted it to be smooth. That was the important thing, is to be smooth surface. Then I took Prima's oil pastels. These are the regular oil pastels, not the water-soluble ones. And starting with the center, I started adding rings of colors around the middle because that's where I wanted the mandala to go. I just want to say that you see I'm working on a deli paper. As I experimented and experienced, these oil pastels stain and are very hard to remove from any surface, so I made sure that I was protecting my surface by putting a deli paper that I could throw out. This is actually the second experiment that I did with this card, as the first one really didn't turn out properly. The first one I had actually done with like brighter colors, and in retrospect I should have gone with brighter colors so they would show underneath the black. But I really liked the blues, so I went with the blues on this one. This card took me a long time to figure out because I had an idea in my head of what I wanted to do, as I wanted to recreate something that we used to do in kindergarten or when we do in primary school, where we scratch away things when we put black on crayons, black paint, and then scratch away. But this didn't turn out exactly how I wanted it, so I had to do this twice. And it took a long time to figure everything out, the right proportions of materials and products. I didn't go fully all the way out because I knew that the mandala would fit perfectly in the circle that I had already made. I did go over some of the colors just to make sure there were no white spots anywhere, because I wanted it to be very smooth in the background. The next step is to color the pastels with some paint. This is acrylic paint from Dina Wakley. This is a night color, and the key is to just cover the whole background. I did this already, as I said before, and I covered it directly with the paint, but it actually didn't work as well as I wanted it, as the paint came frayed too much. So I didn't like the way it looked, so I had to do it again, and I went on the internet to find a solution for this, and I looked it up and I saw that people add soap to this, to the solution, to the paint, so it will work better. So that's what I did. I took some hand soap and put it in a little jar with the paint, and then did 2 coats of the paint. Then I took this new stamp set that I recently got. This is a Concord and 9th Mandala stamps, and using my Stamp-a-ma-jig from Inkadinkado, which I could line up things with it, I was able to stamp it onto my card. This took me a long time to figure out the aligning. I really wish I would have had a stamp platform, but I don't have it yet, and I'm hoping to get it soon. And this would have saved me a lot of time, but doing it the first time, it took me a long time to figure it out. By this time, the second time around, I was able to figure out the alignment really well. So this stamp tool comes with a little like see-through kind of acetate, and you stamp the image on it, so then you can line it up perfectly on your card. So as doing this, I'm using some archival ink, which I used an alcohol ink to remove it after, so it's easily, not alcohol ink, sorry, I used alcohol to remove it from the acetate, but this was a good guide to have for the stamping. This way you can line up where you want the stamp to go, and you just line it up on your paper, and then the tool, basically you line up the corner with the corner of the acetate sheet, and then the same thing you do is you line up the big stamping tool with the corner as well. I used a little bit of powder just to make sure that the embossing powder wouldn't stick to my background. And then I took some distressed embossing ink from Holtz, inked my mandala stamp, and then held it really carefully and pressed. The stamp tool that I'm using, the one with the handle, this is a Prima marketing one, but you can use any stamp tool to do this. Then I took some clear embossing powder from Ranger. This I already have in a little tub, so it's easy to just put in and spread on my project, on my card. And then all I do is just take off the rest into the jar and then heat set it and emboss the areas. So that was really easy to do. I'm just going around with a little bit of a brush just to remove some of the excess on the edges, because I guess that's where it stayed because it was a little bit wet, but it basically embossed perfectly where the mandala stamp was. These stamps from Concord and 9th are beautiful, and they really stamp a perfect image. I really am impressed with how well they stamp. I'm just going back and fixing a little bit of the areas where the embossing powder didn't catch, and then I'm just going to heat set it again and melt the embossing powder. Once the first mandala set was melted, I took the next size mandala. This set from Concord and 9th comes with the different sets to create a full mandala all the way in, and it's just a beautiful stamp set, and they all nest inside of each other and fit perfectly. So I just had to figure out a way to basically be able to line it all up to make sure that everything was going to be inside the other. So again, I used my acetate tool, and I didn't have to stamp this one, the inside, because I could just line the outside out of the first mandala and then line up with this Stamp-a-ma-jig, and then just go ahead and figure out where the next one goes. And I repeated the same step with this different mandalas all the way in until I was done with all the smaller ones as well. I do have to point out that I'm not really sure, though it looks like my card took me no time at all. It actually took me a long time, which I already said, but I felt like a lot of things went wrong, and I really want to point out this is a really important thing to say, because so many times you make mistakes, or I make mistakes, and I have to fix them. And in this specific card, I was getting very frustrated because every single time I had to do things twice. And as you see, like I stained things and things spilled and just things were going wrong. But at the end of it all, just working through it and continuing to persevere, I was able to get the look that I wanted, and the idea that I had in my head finally came into fruition. And I was really happy about that, even though I really felt like it was not going to come out like the way I wanted it at all, because it was just going mistake after mistake after mistakes, and I had to do so many things twice. Even the sentiment, even though I don't show it, I had to do it twice. So many things just didn't happen the way I wanted them to be, and I really felt like something was telling me that I should stop. But then I continued and persevered, and I was able to get it the way I wanted it. By the third mandala, I felt like I was already an expert because I've done it already before, and this was my second time. So I basically didn't even use the acetate sheet. I just lined it up inside, put my stamping tool on top, and then used my Stamp-a-ma-jig basically to just hold it in place and hold it straight, because I knew exactly where I was stamping. So that was really easy way to layer as well. So by the third time, I guess I could have done this originally by just lining up the first one, and then the other ones could have just nested into each other. So again, I'm doing the same thing, just stamping and then adding the embossing powder and melting it. I also want to say that I really encourage you to try this technique. It's really, really fun. Besides the fact that these mandalas are just gorgeous, and you can use them in so many different techniques. Doing this specific technique with the resist on the scratching crayons, it's just so much fun. And I've already gone through all the frustrations for you, so all you have to do is just follow the steps that I'm saying here, and it will be fine. I already went through all the experiments and tests, so you can just go and experiment with it yourself, and you'll see it will be much faster for you. So although it took me a long time, and I feel like I expressed my frustration here about it, I really feel that if you do it, it will not happen to you, because I've already explained what to do and what not to do. I also want to point out that you can use any type of acrylic, heavy body acrylic paint. As long as you mix it with the soap, it will work. And you can also use a MISTI platform to stamp, which will work perfectly, or even the new Holtz one. Now it was time for the fun part of the project. I took a very skinny bamboo stick, the ones that you, a skewer that you use for the barbecue, and I started scratching away in between the embossed areas. The reason why I embossed everything was not only to give it an outline, but also to have an area where it's all contained and I can scratch inside of them and get the different colors inside the stamped area. They also, another thing that it did is that because it was a clear embossing powder, it gave the black a very nice shiny effect. I wanted to say that you have to be careful when you're scratching, because even though it's embossed and it's pretty sticky and stays on, some of it, the embossing ink, can easily be scratched off if you scratch too hard. So I do suggest to just be careful when you're scratching, to just stay within the lines as much as you can, and it really helps to, when you're doing the embossing, to just do one layer of embossing, not two. You don't want the layers to be very thick. A great idea would also be to use the very fine clear embossing ink, but I actually didn't have that, so I just used the regular clear embossing from Ranger. And another thing that I realized that I should have gone with brighter colors, because I felt like the blue wasn't shown as much with the black behind. It's not really like a black, it's like a dark blue, and I think with all the other blues it didn't show as much as I wanted it. It still gave the effect, and the idea that I wanted to do really came out the way I wanted it, but I wish it would have been a little bit brighter. This Concord and 9th set also comes with the die cutting set, and it has the pieces for each mandala separately, so you could cut it into different layers and basically make them different heights, or just cut some of them and not others. And so what I did is I first cut the large one just to take out the mandala out of the background, and then I took a smaller one and then just cut out the center so I could raise it with some pop dots. To assemble the card, I took some black cardstock and some blue cardstock and layered them on top of each other. Then I took tape and my tape runner, and I stuck the large mandala and then the smaller one with some pop dots, and I skewed it a little bit, turned it so it would be off skew and it would look great in the center that way. For my sentiment, I took a word from the actual set. This says congratulations, and I took one of the blue strips that I had cut out of the card and stamped it with some distress ink, embossing ink, from the same one that I used before. And then I used some black embossing powder. This is Blue Fern Studios Ebony, and just did it in black so it would match the rest of the card. And then I heat set the embossing ink so it would melt and look shiny. Then I took the strip and I cut it into a little banner that I could put on the card. I just used my scissors and eyeballed it, but you don't have to do that. You could actually measure it if you really want to. Then I took another one, which is a black little banner that I had already cut from the black cardstock, and I glued one on top of the other. I did the black, I did it directly with the tape runner, and then I used some pop dots for the blue. Finally added a little gemstone. This is a Prima Satin Crystals gem. And then I took a little small stamp from the mandala set. This is the tiniest one out of the set, and I started stamping it with my black archival ink. I took the smallest stamp platform from Fiskars that I recently bought and just used it to stamp the little mandala on basically on the first place that I wanted it to be. I had to go over it twice because it didn't fully stamped. I guess I was too worried that I'll get it wrong, that I didn't press hard enough. Then I went with the second one, and I didn't realize that the actual platform got dirty and stained my first flower that I had done, so I had to clean it up. And then when I went for the third one, I got fed up and I decided not to use the platform but to use my finger for it because I just couldn't get it done. So I just stuck the little stamp onto my finger and actually got the best image when I just pressed it. It was actually the easiest thing to do. And then I went around and created some more images of this little flower, and it really added a really nice effect to the background. Since the card base was black, I decided to add a piece of matching cardstock inside so I could write inside of it as my sentiment. I also made another card in pink, the same exact technique, because I really wanted to test the brighter colors, and I really love how it turned out as well. And I used some brighter colors with the same exact technique and the same paint and everything, and I really love how it popped up a lot more. And this one I just used the happy birthday sentiment. Thank you so much for watching. For more inspiration, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Bye!